Thank you for joining our online community. Through today's message, it's our desire that you will experience the presence, power, and plan of God for your life. If you have been blessed by our online resources, you can choose to be a blessing to many more souls by giving to our online campus. You can visit our website at crossroadscn.com, navigate to the More tab, then click on Online Giving. Thank you for your generosity and enjoy today's message.
Hi, Mom. Hey. Mom, I've been doing some thinking, and I have a question to ask you.
Yeah, what's that?
Where do babies come from?
Well, they basically come from,
What about the dinosaurs? Where'd they all go?
well, scientists sometimes say...
About the end of the world. Is that gonna happen soon? Say when I'm older. Let's say I want to do smoking and drink and watch R-rated movies. Can I still be a Christian?
You asked for it, answering your burning questions.
Wait, Mom, what about the moon landing? Did that really happen? I heard Bigfoot's real. Is this true? Hey, it wasn't made of life itself.
Oh man, your burning questions, what might they be? A little over 6 years ago, Katie and I said our I do's. It was an exciting moment. It happened actually March 18th of 2012. Got that right. And it was just a little over 6 years ago. And the wedding was beautiful. Katie and I, we spent hours, and really Katie spent hours and hours just combing over every single little detail. I mean, I remember like the fight that her and her mom had about the pink candies that we were going to have. And it was this huge ordeal, this huge blow up. But it was like every little thing had to be perfect. Every little thing had to be perfect inside of this wedding. And she wanted pink everywhere and like highlights of pinks and touches of pinks and all these different things. And I think that that's how most brides are, right? They want everything about this wedding day to go perfect. They want everything because they've been planning this their whole lives and they want everything to go perfect. And most grooms don't really care about the wedding. All they care about is the honeymoon. I mean, like, let's be honest. For Katie and I, this day was, it was a huge day. Every little girl's dream, marry the man of their dreams, have this big, beautiful wedding. And thank you, all of you celebrities and social media, because you have made this bigger and bigger and more expensive. So I am so glad that I don't have a girl right now, because I can't imagine having to pay as much as a lady has to pay to get married. I mean, it's crazy, all these things that go into it. You kind of dream up all these different things. You want everything to go right. In fact, I have a couple of pictures from our wedding right there. That's me. I always dreamed about stuffing the cake in her face, and my dream came true. It was exciting. But that's the place that we got married at. It's called the Kendall Plantation. So if you're ever in the northwest corner of San Antonio, that's actually what it looks like. It's surprising. It's actually green that day. We don't get a lot of green grass in San Antonio. But yeah, that's some pictures from our wedding. And you have all those people that are there, and you just want everything to go perfect. Right? But there's something that happens with weddings. Nothing ever goes perfect. It's like no matter what, there's going to be some sort of issue. And I think the biggest reason that happens is because you have all of your family, right? All of your family is together. Even those family members, right? It's like, I got to invite them to the wedding. And there's this thing that happens. It's like family can't get together without there being at least a little bit of drama. It's not even fun if that doesn't happen, right? And so it's like you do all these preparations, you want everything to go perfect, but then something happens. There's family drama, sometimes it's something cute, like you got the little ring bearer who gets scared and takes off, right, and runs away. And then you're like, did we actually give him the rings or not, right? You're trying to figure that out, and you have the flower girl who comes down and she just like throws all the flowers in one spot instead of it being this long train and this long run that you have. All these different things happen. And then sometimes you have the awkward one happen, right? Because it's like you just got married and you're sitting there and you're going, did you invite them? Like, no, we didn't invite them. We specifically did not invite them. They're just here like always, right? I mean, there's always something that happens. There's like something that goes wrong. And so for me and Katie, that something that went wrong was John Mark, our cousin John Mark. And he's technically not a blood relation, okay? I love John Mark. John Mark, if you watch this, I love you, brother. And but John Mark showed up to our wedding, and he had some sort of virus, right? And so he comes down, and whenever you have family come in town, we actually don't have a lot of family that lives in San Antonio. We have a ton of friends that are like family that live in San Antonio, but we don't have a lot of family that lives there. So most of our family was coming in, and whenever you do that, you try and save some money, so everybody's kind of in close quarters, right? Well, luckily, John Mark brought this virus. And it was like this stomach bug. And, just like, so people are starting to get sick and people are throwing up on our perfect day. All this kind of stuff's going on. And the whole time, Katie is just going, man, I hope that my grandpa doesn't get sick so that he can walk me down the aisle. And the whole time, I'm just going, I hope Katie doesn't get sick so our honeymoon's not ruined, right? I'm just a little selfish, but that's what I'm thinking. And so it kind of, we get to the point, we get to the wedding, and, grandpa's feeling okay. He can walk her down the aisle. And Katie's not sick. I'm like, this is perfect. This is going good. We get through the wedding. Everything kind of goes off without a hitch. There were a couple just minor things, not really a big deal. And we had a great time. We celebrated. We had a lot of fun. And then the next day, me and Katie got up and we went on our honeymoon. And we went to the Bahamas. It was a blast. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. We get there and everything's kind of going well. And then that night, something happened. It was like the mood started to change, right? Katie got sick. And so Katie got sick, and she's throwing up everywhere and just feels horrible and all this kind of stuff. The very first night of our honeymoon. And I'm just sitting there going, God, why? Right? For me and Katie, we waited until marriage, and so I was really excited about our honeymoon. And then all of a sudden, she's sick, right? And I'm just going, I can't believe this, God. I've been faithful. What's going on? My mic fell. Well, God, why is this happening to me? And I'm just trying to figure this out. Like, what's going on? Why is this happening? And then from Katie's perspective, right? She's got all these plans in her mind. Every little girl, I want to marry the man of my dreams, right? She got it. And she's like, I want to marry the man of my dreams. I want this to happen. This is going to be so exciting. And we're going to, it's going to be this romantic man who swoops me up. It kind of has like the knight in shining armor, right? I'm like that, but just not buff. And so it's, she's like, she has these ideas and these plans and these hopes. And then our first night of the honeymoon, she's sick. And man, she kind of crawled out of the bed, goes over to the bathroom. She ended up falling asleep. She ended up falling asleep right next to the toilet. It was bad. And she kind of gets up and has enough strength, and she army crawls over to the bed, right? She gets over there and looks up at the man of her dreams and says, honey, I'm sick. I'm throwing up everywhere. And what did I do? Like a great husband, I shot up and I go, oh no! And I passed out. And my poor wife, on the first night of our honeymoon, spent the night on the floor of the bathroom throwing up, and I slept great. And so she's going, God, why? Right? She's going, why did this happen to me? Oh my God, I've done all these things. I've been faithful. Why is this happening to me? Why did I marry him? Why'd you let me make this decision? Oh man, there's times like that in our lives though, and it may not be that silly, but there's times like that in our lives where we get to that point. Something happens and maybe it's just kind of silly. It's like you decided you were going to have a kid and then the kid doesn't sleep and you're going, God, why, right? Or there's something that happens in your life and you're going, God, why is this happening? Why are you allowing pain and why are you allowing this to happen? You see different things going on, and it's like, why don't they have food? Why are they starving? Why is things easier for them and so much harder for everybody else? God, why did they pass? God, why did they have to suffer through that process? And why, God, why is there so much suffering? It's a question that we tend to ask. Why does God allow suffering? We're looking at this and we're going, God, there's so much good in this world that you've created, but why is there so much bad? And I think that there's kind of three different viewpoints we tend to ask this question from. We tend to ask this question out of three different views. The first one is a global view. It's a global view, and it's kind of like we realize that it's perfect God, and we're going, okay, why did a perfect God allow sin into the world? Why is there sin in the world? Why is this happening? Why, if God is so perfect and God created all of these things in perfection, then why is there sin here? And I think one of the keys that we have to look at whenever we're looking at this sin is that to realize the difference between allow and cause. We have to look at the difference between allow and cause. God doesn't cause suffering, but He does allow it. He doesn't cause suffering, but He does allow it. What do I mean by that? See, He allows it because He gave us a choice. Each of us have a choice that we make. Each of us have an option. We can choose God or we can reject Him. We can choose His plan or we can reject Him. But each of us have a choice. Each of us have this opportunity to choose to love God or to turn from Him, to choose to love God or to walk away. And whenever we choose sin, there are consequences that follow sin. There are consequences that are the immediate result of sin. And sometimes we can get away with it and not feel those consequences, but sooner or later, they're going to catch up. Sin has consequences. Sometimes the consequences are put onto people unfairly and unnecessarily, but they're still the result of a choice, and they're still the result of a sin. Right now, there's artificial intelligence that is being made, and people are coming up and they're looking around at this artificial intelligence and they're trying to figure out, well, how much choice should we actually give it? Because the fear is that you might create this robot, right? There's like all these movies that are built around this. There's all these different things that are coming out constantly. And it's like, well, the fear is if I give them a choice, they might choose something that harms me or that hurts me. But if you don't give that thing a choice, it can't genuinely love you. I could create a robot and command it to love me, and then all of a sudden I have this robot, and it can be so loving all the time, right? But it doesn't have a choice not to because I've programmed it to. There's a huge fear that happens whenever I say, okay, I'm going to let you see the world. I'm going to let you see the good and the bad that can be. And then you have to make a choice. But that's exactly what God did with us. Because of His great love for us, He wanted us to have a genuine love and respect for Him. And part of that happens whenever we can see all things. We can choose Him. Choose to not have these things in our life and choose to not have sin. But so often we let our own desires pull us away. In James, he says it this way. It's James chapter 1, verses 13 through 15. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does He tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it's full grown, gives birth to death. James is saying that the reason that there's suffering in this world is because we have chosen it. Not because it was God's intention, but because we gave in to our own evil desires. And that those desires necessarily weren't the sin, but it was whenever we gave into those and we actually acted upon those desires, and then it gave birth to sin. And then even in the moment of sin, instead of choosing to turn away and to run away from those things, it gave birth to death. And the result of death is suffering. It's pain. It's hardship. It's things we inflict on other people. It's things we experience ourselves. And none of us are immune. In fact, in Ecclesiastes, the author says this, indeed, there is no one on earth who is righteous, no one who does what is right and never sins. In Romans, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Not one of us are immune. Suffering and pain and sin, they're not a product of some angry God just trying to extend wrath on people, but they're really the product of our own choices and selfishness. They're the product of what we have chosen. They're the product of the steps that we've taken. God allows it, but He also wants us to have the choice to turn from sin and to choose Him. He allows us to have a choice. I think another view that we ask this question from really is kind of this personal view. Because I think sometimes it's easier to grasp, okay, God gave us a choice because He wants us to be able to choose to love Him. And there are people that choose to harm others instead of loving God completely like He's asked us to. But then in this personal view, it's kind of like, okay, well then, where is God when I'm suffering? Why are bad things happening to me whenever I'm trying to do the right thing? Where's God whenever I'm suffering? Oftentimes people ask this out of frustration. They ask this question out of pain. They ask this question out of just isolation at times, because that's what it feels like. When we ask that question, we feel alone. We feel afraid. We feel like, I'm just up here and I'm just suffering on my own. Like, God, where are you in the midst of this? Why aren't you here with me? God, where are you? And the lie of isolation is exactly what the enemy wants us to buy into. To buy into this idea that you are completely alone in your suffering, that you are completely alone in your pain, in your frustration. But the truth is that God is always with you. His word says that He will never leave you. And in fact, Christ suffered for us. Christ came alongside and took on our suffering so that we could know that in the midst of our suffering, that Christ has already suffered for us. The writer in Isaiah, talking about Jesus before Jesus was even born to Mary, says this: "Surely He took up our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we considered Him punished by God, stricken by Him and afflicted. But He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. And the punishment that brought us peace was on Him. By His wounds we are healed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned our own way, and the Lord has laid on Him the iniquity of us all." Where was God whenever I was suffering? On the cross for my sin, my choice. He was taking our punishment. Where's God when bad things are happening to you? On the cross, being bruised, broken, having His stripes being the covering for your healing and for your pain. Saying, I know you're going through something hard, and I've already paid the price. You can and you will get through this because I've already taken on the worst of it. He suffered for us. He was winning your peace. He was winning your healing. And being crushed for you gave you a comforter in times of trouble. Because Christ has already suffered for you, you know that you are not alone. Because not only did Christ suffer for us, but He suffered with us. He is there and He is an ever-present help in times of need. God stepped down out of this holy dwelling and throne and put on flesh and blood to walk with you and me, to go through the same challenges and circumstances and the difficulties of life and literally suffer for us, but also to suffer with us, to experience ridicule and shame and to see disease and sickness and all these different things, and to be there in the midst of things to suffer with us. And then the Bible says that God put His Spirit to dwell within us. Actually says that whenever you accept Christ, that God makes His home within you. And that your spirit is what testifies with God to say that this one is covered, this one is holy and righteous because of what my Son has done. So you know what that means? No matter what you're going through, God is in you and is with you and is suffering with you. He is right there with you, and He is continually reaching out and going, I've already paid the price for this. I've already covered this. Trust in me to be your strength. Trust in me and rely on me because I am with you and you are not alone. One of the greatest examples I think that we see of this is actually found in the book of Daniel. And there are three men. And they're going through this process where this king, and his name was Nebuchadnezzar, and he's going, hey, look, you need to bow down to me. And these men say something. They say, look, no matter what, we will not do it because we serve God and we're going to continue to follow Him. And we believe that God will save us. But even if He doesn't, we still won't do it. And so King Nebuchadnezzar sees their defiance, and in order to make a statement, he goes and he starts to turn this flame and this furnace up as high as it will go. In fact, the Bible shows us that this furnace kept getting hotter and hotter and hotter to the point that the guards who were supposed to throw them in ended up dying. It actually describes it as they were bound and they're getting closer and closer to this fire. The guards start to die, and it's almost like with the guards at their last push. They just get enough room to where these bound men don't have any choice, but they fall into the flames. And immediately something happens. And in fact, the king ends up calling out, and you find this in Daniel chapter 3. And he said, this is the king, he said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed. And the fourth looked like the son of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire. And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair on their head singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. The men were completely unharmed, and Christ was there in the midst of the fire with them, walking around. They stood in the midst of a fire, calm, unharmed, and unfazed. They had faith that no matter what, God would be with them, even if things didn't turn out like they were praying that they would. But their lack of fear to suffer for God resulted in a huge miracle, not only in their lives being saved, but in the testimony that happened to all of the leaders of one of the biggest nations at the time. They began to see, and now all of a sudden the religion of that country, of that nation was changed. The thoughts of that nation was changed. Who they declared was Most High was no longer the king, but was the one true God. Not only that, they weren't even burned. In fact, the only thing that was burned was the chains that bound them. That was the only thing that fell off. Not even their clothing was singed. You know, there are times whenever we go through a trial and we go through a fire and we go through a season of suffering. But whenever you realize that Christ is with us and that there is a purpose in this, those chains that were the reason you fell into that trial in the first place will get unbound. God will set you free. Whenever you realize that He is with us, all of a sudden it's like, you know what, no matter what I'm going through, I know that on the other side of this, that Christ is with me, that God is with me, and I'm going to be stronger on the other side of this than I was on the beginning. I know that I'm not going to be bound by these chains. I know that these things that I may have made the choice. I may have done something. I have some ownership in getting to this point right here. But I know that even in the midst of that God is with me and He's not leaving me alone. The chains that brought me here won't hold me back there. There's some of you who you're struggling in different areas and you feel that pain of, maybe you feel isolation and maybe you see other people and they're getting married or things are happening and you're kind of sitting in singleness and you're wondering, God, why am I in the midst of this? Did you know that God might be trying to teach you purity in singleness so that you can have purity in marriage? Did you know that there might be something happening in the midst of that feeling of loneliness where God's saying, look, if you will trust in me instead of yourself, you will learn to trust others as well. You're going to be more whole on the other side of this if you will have faith in me and let me work in the midst of your pain. But no matter what the suffering might be that you're going through, the Word of God promises us that He will set us free from those chains that threw us into that in the beginning if we let Him. And the reason for that is because Christ strengthens us. He strengthens us in suffering. He perfects us in suffering. If you're going through a trial, I want you to know that God is near you because His Word promises that He is near to the brokenhearted. God is with you. And we all need to be strengthened. We all need to be refined. There are things in each and every one of us, not just you, me. There are things in each and every one of us that have to be refined, that God is working on. And there are times that we go through a period of suffering, we go through a trial, we go through a hardship so that God can continue to refine us and so that we can realize that it is His strength that gets us through. It's His strength that overcomes. It's not our power, but it's His strength. And in fact, Paul, who was a major writer of the New Testament, wrote about this in Corinthians. He says this, "Therefore, in order to keep me from being conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me." He's saying I was actively going through suffering. And 3 times I pleaded with the Lord, "God, take this from me." But He said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you. My grace is enough. For my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in my weaknesses. I delight in insults and in hardships and persecutions and in difficulties, because when I am weak, then I am strong." First part of this passage, he's saying, look, I suffer for Christ. I suffer for Him. I have been through hard times, but in each of those hard times, I will boast, because in every one of my weaknesses, in every one of my failings, and every time that I have something binding me and throwing me into a fire, I know that in that moment that Christ strengthens me, and that I'm going to come out on the other side stronger because of that. Because it's not me boasting in me, for I have nothing to boast in, but it's Christ through me, strengthening me, that I boast in. Quite simply, you combat suffering, you combat pain whenever you boast about what God is doing in the midst of your life. Whenever you look back on those times of hardship in your life and you see pain that was inflicted upon you, whenever you see circumstances and choices that you made that caused pain to be brought upon you, whenever those things happen, you can boast in who Christ is. Not in the situation, but who Christ is in the midst of the situation, because He wants to use something for you. There's a purpose in that pain. You are not suffering alone, but you are suffering with Christ. And if you will let Him, He will give you a purpose in it and through it. Whenever you begin to declare the weaknesses that got you there, whenever you begin to declare the pain that you've gone through, all of a sudden you begin to be the encouragement and the hope that others need who are going through the same thing, who are fighting through the same struggles. You begin to be that source of hope, encouraging someone, I've been there. I've made the same mistake. I've dealt with the same pain. Look, I didn't deserve it, but this was brought onto me too. And I promise you, you'll get through it. Because Christ will strengthen you. Jesus talking to His disciples, and he's telling them, look, these are all the horrible things that are going to happen. But I want you to know that I'm with you. And He says this in John 16:33. He says, I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In me you may have peace. Because don't mistake it. In this world you will have trouble. But take heart. I have overcome the world. Yes. Oftentimes we look at this and we kind of have another viewpoint where we ask this, well, why would God allow suffering? And it's this. We go, look, okay, I understand. God's overcome. He can strengthen me. He can do all of this. But it's almost like this missional view. Okay, what's the point then? Well, what's the point of suffering? And we have this missional view that just asks, okay, what good is there in suffering? Like, what's the point of this? And what's the purpose of this? I'm just not grasping it. What good is there in this? And honestly, how you answer this question has to do more with your own vision of God's purpose for your life and your faith in Him than anything else. It's not a God issue. This is a me issue. It's a humility issue. It's a pride issue. It's a surrender issue. Truthfully, it has to do with your mission. If your objective is simply to be happy and to be comfortable, then you're never going to realize the mission God has for you when you go through a trial. But if your mission is to share the love of Christ with everyone you come in contact with, no matter the circumstance, then you will see God do something miraculous, even in the midst of a trial, even in the midst of pain, even in the midst of what might feel like suffering. Paul, talking to a church and encouraging them in Philippians chapter 1, says this: "Now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me," what has happened to Paul at this time? He's in jail. He's writing a letter from a jail cell. He's shackled. He's in prison. And his only crime was preaching the gospel. And he says, "I want you to know that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. What the enemy meant to hold the gospel back is actually now using to advance the gospel further and faster than ever before." And he says, "As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. And because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear." What the devil meant for bad, God is using for good. What the devil meant to hold back the word of God, now God is using to advance even quicker and more fully. Paul saw that being locked up for preaching the gospel was actually another opportunity to preach it even more. All of a sudden, now he's had time to write. Now he's had time to do something. Now he had time to talk to people that he couldn't have ever talked to before. People that wouldn't come to his church, he was now going to them and saying, "Hey, bud, you locked me up in here. You're going to have to listen to me talk about Jesus. You want to put me in here? Hey, look, you got an opportunity. You know what? We got stuck in this elevator, but guess what? That means I got a couple hours till the fire department gets here. I'm going to tell you about Jesus. Like, I don't care about the situation that I'm in or the circumstance that I'm in. You know, I might have been going here trying to do this, and all of a sudden I'm in this place now, but guess what? I couldn't have talked to you otherwise. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to otherwise." And the gospel began to be faster. It began to move quicker. It began to be something that people were starting to be encouraged, because even though Paul was locked up, he was still preaching, he was still writing, he was still encouraging. And they said, "You know what? If Paul can do that while he's chained up, I can do that while I'm free." It started to go faster. Paul's suffering was redeemed. The gospel spread faster because it wasn't held up by freedom. It was held up by his faith in Christ. It was there and being spurred on by his faith to say, "I'm going to let God use this. I'm not going to let the enemy have a foothold in this, but I'm going to find the good in the midst of this." You know, sometimes our problem in this is that we confuse suffering with discipline. We confuse suffering with discipline, and like a good father lovingly disciplining his child, sometimes we look at our circumstances and we forget that God might be just trying to grow us and teach us and mold us and shape us. We might be going through a hardship and not quite understanding why we're going through that, but it very well could just be God refining us. In fact, about 1.5 years ago, I had one of these moments. I was taking a youth group on a missions trip, and we're going out, and we've been working this whole week, and we've been leading kids to Christ, and we've been doing this vacation Bible school. We were about 4 hours away from our home, and we're going and have this group of about 20, 25 students, and we're sitting here, and we're doing this missions trip together. And it's exciting. I'm away from my family, and Katie is at home with a sick kid, and she's sick herself, and all this other stuff is going on, and I'm there with these kiddos, and it kind of looks like I'm making the sacrifice, right? I'm there, and I'm actually having a blast. I'm with these kids, and our last day, I was like, you know what, I want our kids to have a good time, and so we're going to celebrate. We're going to go ice skating, and then after we're done ice skating, we're going to go to a Rangers game, because Texas Rangers are the best team in the world. And so we're going to go to a Rangers game and celebrate. And a bunch of those kids in San Antonio is not really a pro team, so this was something that was huge for them. And so we kind of take off and we go, and we're going to go ice skating, and we just have all these kids around, and this is so much fun, and they're all, hey, Pastor Cam, how do you do this? Because I was like the good ice skater and everything like that, right? I was the talented one. And so, they're like, hey, Pastor Cam, how do you do that? How do you do this? And one of the students, and she comes up and she goes, hey, Pastor Cam, how do you go fast? Like, how do you ice skate real fast? And I was like, let me show you, right? And so I was like, let me show you how it's done, right? I got skills to pay the bills. And so I was like, all right, hey, just watch and learn, okay, sweetie? And so I sat there and I took off, right? I'm like, and I was just flying. I mean, I looked like the Olympics in there, just, and I'm just taking off. And then all of a sudden there's this like little pool of children. And I'm like, these children, what are they doing in my way? Do they not know who I am? And so I'm like, you know what? Okay, I haven't hockey stopped in a while, so I'm not going to try a hockey stop. I'm just going to kind of like circle the wagons right here, and just slow it down. And so I go in and I try to make this big circle, and I get like right here, and I don't even know what happened, but the next thing, I'm on the floor. Like, I kissed some ice really hard. Like, I actually broke my jaw and 3 teeth. In fact, I have a picture of it. And this isn't long after. And I love this picture because it's a photo op for Mint Dentistry, and it says sexy teeth on the back. And I definitely had some sexy teeth in there. And you can kind of see in there, I had broken those 2 teeth, and there's actually another tooth that's broken as well. And then I had a fracture along my jaw where pieces had broken. And I'm sitting there, and I had been taking kids on a missions trip. And then all of a sudden, I broke my face. It's just kind of like, what's going on? It was kind of silly. It was kind of weird. And as I was trying to figure this out, really, I was kind of praying through it. And all of a sudden, I realized that was God's grace. Because, see, on the outside, I was leading a missions trip. I was a pastor, and all this stuff looked good, and I was making this big sacrifice, being away from my family and being here to come and minister to people, and all these things are going on. But being honest, on the inside, I was dealing with a lot of pride issues. I was dealing with a lot of arrogance and just cockiness and just, in general, selfishness. And honestly, it was almost like God was like, wake up. And I fell down, and I did that, and it happened, and God's favor was still with me and taking care of me through every moment, but it was like, Cam, wake up. You can't keep doing this. You can't keep being a pastor and having this in your heart. No one sees it, but I do. And it wasn't suffering, it was discipline. And it woke me up. And I am so thankful for that ice. I never thought that I would be. But I'm so thankful that happened because all of a sudden God was refining me. It sounds weird to say, but I truthfully think that it was His grace. Hebrews says it this way. And I love the Message version of it. It just comes across so clearly. It says, God is educating you. That's why you must never drop out. He's treating you as dear children. This trouble you're in, it's not punishment. No, it's training. In the normal experience of children. Only irresponsible parents leave children to fend for themselves. Would you prefer an irresponsible God? We respect our own parents for training and not spoiling us. So why not embrace God's training so that we can truly live? While we were children, our parents did whatever might have seemed best to them. But God is doing what actually is best for us. He's training us to live God's holy best. At the time, discipline isn't much fun. It always feels like it's going against the grain. But later, of course, it pays off handsomely. For it's the well-trained who find themselves mature in their relationship with God. Whether it's discipline or it's genuine suffering that you're going through, God uses every circumstance to draw us closer to Him. You are not alone in the midst of it. God will not let this circumstance go without a purpose. The only person who can let that happen is you. God will have a mission for you in the midst of this. He will have something for you to learn. He will have something for you to grow. He will have something for you to teach. He'll have something for you to show. But God will use this. You're not going through something for just some arbitrary reason. No. There is a purpose in this. And you have not seen suffering in the world for no reason. No. God has a purpose for your eyes being open. I think the biggest problem that happens is that we look in the world and we see suffering. And we just wonder, God, why would you allow this? What's your answer to suffering? God, truly, if you were good, why don't you do something about this? God, if you were good, why are there so many people dying of starvation? God, if you were good, why haven't you made an answer? Why do these things keep happening? And I think what we fail to realize is that God's answer to suffering is you. You are the answer to suffering. You are God's hope to suffering. You are God's hope to a dying world. You are God's hope to seeing these things. Whenever you see things happening and there's pain in the world, the response is not to go, God, do something about it, because God's going to look back at you and go, I did. I showed you. I put you here. I sent you for this reason. I sent my son to take care of your sin and to set you free so that you could go into the world and set people free. You are the answer. I haven't given you finances, I haven't given you resources to build your own kingdom, but to build mine and to bring others into it. I haven't put you on this world and given you breath and given you a voice and given you legs to walk just so that you could do the mundane, just so that you could question, but so that you could start being the answer to everyone's question. I put you here. I did give an answer. It's you. I took care of your sin. I took care of your shame. And I set you free from bondage so that you didn't have to walk in that, but so that you could set someone else free, so that you could share my grace. Biggest thing I've come to realize through any suffering or trial is that Christ will redeem it whenever I let Him use it. Biggest thing I've come to realize through suffering in the world is that God didn't open my eyes just to see it and complain about it, but to do something about it. Maybe the question shouldn't even be, God, why do you allow suffering? Maybe it should be, why do I allow it? Why aren't I doing something about it? What could our world look like if we stopped just raising the question, but instead decided to be the answer? If we looked at the pain and the suffering going around in our world and said, okay, I'll answer the call. I'll be the hands and the feet of God. I'll do what you've called me to do. God, I know this pain that I went through when I was a child. I know that there are children going through that pain. I'm going to let you use me to bring them grace. God, I know the pain of loss, of divorce, of all these different struggles. I've been there, but you got me through it. I'm going to help get them through it. God, I know I've been through the fire, but I know that you were with me, and I came out stronger. I'm going to strengthen someone else. What life might be changed because you stopped asking the question of who and became someone's answer. You did something about it because God opened up your heart, opened up your eyes. Maybe you could have said, if God wants to use me, here I am. Didn't hold on to your pain, but you let God redeem it by being His hands and being His feet to a broken world. God sent you. You are the answer. You are the plan. So why allow suffering. Whenever God created us on purpose, for a purpose, and with a purpose. You may feel like you're not enough. God has made His home in you. His grace is enough for you. God, I'm struggling with sin. There's a thorn in my flesh. My grace is enough for you. God, I'm imperfect. I failed. My grace is enough for you. No matter where you've been, no matter what you're doing, He's enough. He'll get you through. Could you be the answer? Could you answer His call? Let's bow our heads.
Thank you for tuning in to today's message. At Crossroads, we believe that community is our calling. If you joined our online community today and are in need of prayer, you can submit your prayer requests to our website by visiting us at crossroadscn.com, hover over the About Us tab, and click Prayer Request. Each and every prayer request that is submitted is prayed over by a Crossroads staff member. We believe in a mighty God who answers our prayers, and we are overjoyed to share in your prayer requests. Once again, thank you for joining us and have a blessed week.